and welcome back to Your American Story on FM News Talk 1047. This is your host, Raja, and I'm absolutely delighted to kick off the inaugural Running of the Bulls contest. And joining me right now is Mont Handley, the patented inventor of PittMoss. And Mont will be pitching to our judges and investors. We have Roger Byford, Alicia McGinnis, and Mel Pirchesky, who are in studio with me. So my role is very simple today. I'm just going to introduce the format and leave it up to the entrepreneur and the judges. Mont's going to go first. He's going to have 4 minutes on the air. After that, the judges have already picked their order in which they're going to ask their questions and give feedback. Each judge gets 3 minutes, and Mont will get 1 minute to close. So with that, we are going to kick this off. And Mont, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Well, thank you, Raja, and hello, judges. My name is Mont Handley. I'm the founder, president, and CEO of PittMoss Development Company. We're a manufacturing startup. We're making PittMoss. It's a sphagnum peat moss alternative that's made from recycled newsprint and organic additives. I met with my CPA about 1.5 years ago, and he said, hey, one of our partners wants to meet you. He came in and said, I've had a 30-year public accounting career in Pittsburgh, and he's met CEOs of startups and he's met CEOs of manufacturers, but I was the very first CEO of a manufacturing startup he'd ever met. So I'm actually very proud of that. Hopefully we're in the midst of a new trend. Our primary competition is Canadian sphagnum peat moss. Peat moss is used by growers and nurseries around the world, actually, to fill their flower pots for growing media. The U.S. imports about 1.1 million tons of the product each year, and it's worth about $500 million on the commodity market. It's dug from ditched and drained and degraded wetlands at huge capital expense to these companies. Weather can affect production; it usually does. Prices can be very volatile. One-way freight charges can double the cost of the product to the grower. Prices are always rising, unit size always decreasing. The bottom line is growers are not loyal to the product, and they're not interested in any of the competitors like compost. The proof that the growers are not loyal to this product is that we have commitments for 10% of our first year's projections, about 220 tons of the product. Our competitive advantage of PittMoss, it's made from recycled paper. We can go right down to the south side, Atlas Recycling, and get a ton of paper for $100. We can add another $20 worth of organic additives, and our cost of goods is $120. Peat moss is currently selling in western Pennsylvania at $400 to $700 a ton, depending on volumes. Our profits can be staggering, even at 25 to 30% less the cost of sphagnum peat moss. We're going to try to keep production close to customers and paper supplies. We plan on having a 24/7, year-round, on-demand manufacturing basis. Most important, our product looks like sphagnum peat moss, it acts like peat moss, and we've gotten a stamp of approval. We did an EPA-funded SBIR grant research project at Purdue University, my alma mater, and the research was great. But more importantly, we did commercial studies as well. Johnson the Florist, which is a big name in western Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh, they liked the product so well that they gave us a 2-year lease for $1 a year for all the land and equipment we needed to build our plant. So I'm not asking you to fund an experiment. I'm asking you to help tell our story to prospective buyers. We want to market and promote PittMoss from Michigan to Maine to North Carolina. It's 1/3 of the industry from the Pittsburgh plant, and we're looking for $125,000, and we're offering 7.5% of the company. So you're probably asking, why me? Well, I'm the inventor of the product. I invented it 17 years ago. I researched, scouted the equipment for the last 15 years, and I worked on my savings and credit. I quit my job to build my plant. I took out a bank loan. I used 0% interest credit card checks. And finally, in March, I cashed out all my 401ks. And yeah, that's 401ks with an S, as in 3 of them, all to build my production facility. I'm happy to report we're up and running. We're making, packing, and shipping PittMoss as of 3 weeks ago. So, Raja, that's my story. I want to thank you, and I want to thank the judges for listening.
Yeah, thank you, Mont. It's an inspiring story for our entire audience. So at this point, I'll turn it over to the judges. And Mel, you were drawn to go first, so you have your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Raj. Well, Mont, first of all, congratulations on taking the leap to become an entrepreneur. More than
Thank you.
anything, it takes courage.
I'm starting to understand that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you'll find no matter what, it takes courage.
But I'll
in
tell
the
you
first
something.
year, and in the 5th year, and in the 25th year, it still
I
takes
haven't lost
courage.
one night of sleep since I left my job and cashed up my 401k. I've slept like a baby.
Good for you. Every 2 hours at night, like a baby. I've heard that one. I'm trying to clarify. In my experience, Mott, when people have an idea or a product or even a service that they're going to sell and it has lots of advantages, as yours does, from the environmental and the point of view that you're not going to be draining wetlands and those kinds of things, which are all great, and people should be buying this because of that. At the end of the day, though, what counts is how much less expensive is this going to be, really, because people are creatures of habit, and you often won't get people to switch for what I'd call a good reason, meaning environmental and so on, but they would switch for a great reason, which would mean they could save a lot of money.
Right.
So what kind of number do you project you're going to be able to save in the marketplace, delivered to whether the customer was in Pittsburgh or if the customer was in Georgia?
Well, first of all, our strategy is to focus on the customers that are paying the highest premium prices for sphagnum peat moss. These are usually smaller or medium-sized growers who are usually buying from a wholesaler here in the United States. So by the time they're actually receiving a ton of peat moss on their property, they're paying $700 plus for a unit of sphagnum peat moss. If we were charging $700, I'd be ashamed of myself. I mean, we're actually thinking we're going to our sales pitch to everybody is that we're going to be 25 to 30% less than sphagnum peat moss. Although we're waiting to hear what they're paying, and then we're going to adjust our prices to be 25 to 30% less.
And then what kind of Martin, what kind of profit margin would you have if you sold the product for 25 or 30% less than what they're now paying?
Sure. At a $700 price point that we're competing against, we're talking somewhere in the $580, $600 range at that point. Our cost of goods is $120. So we're tripling our money.
So you'd have a 70 or 80% gross profit margin.
Yeah.
One of the things I would recommend for you to think about, Mott, is what if you were to give the customer a 50% discount? You're still going to end up with probably at least a 50% margin, which is pretty terrific. And you could end up with a lot more sales, a lot more tons sold. Even though you make less per ton, you'll make it in the volume.
I'm actually thinking about doing that, and a lot of our early adopter customers are getting really great prices right now.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Roger, you are up next, so I'll turn this over to you.
Thank you. Good presentation, Mark.
Thank you, Roger.
I have a question. Have you thought at all about patents or intellectual property for the product?
I actually earned a patent. It's patent number 5653053.
Okay.
And just like 3 weeks ago, we earned our registration for our PittMoss name as well, which is important to me because I've had a bit of a battle with the Canadian Sphagnum Peat Moss Association. Every time I pitch a name, they come back to me and say, you can't do that. And in fact, our first name was eliminated because of that. So I see an industry that's a little frightened by what I'm presenting.
Yeah, and do you think that your patent will provide you with what they call broad protection, that it should prevent anybody from duplicating what you're doing?
What I have is a process patent. I had two smart engineers / JDs from Purdue, and I'm partial because I also went to that school. But they really walked me through the process of patenting my product. I have I hate to say this, but a secret sauce, if you will, secret herbs and spices that only I know, and one other individual that's on my payroll. So there's the patent, and then there's the, secret handshake.
Yeah. When I looked at your projections,
Yes.
your profits seem remarkably high in the out years as you go forward. Do you think you can sustain that, or do you think that you'll really need more people, for example, to help the business grow?
I actually think we will need some more people, but I'm also entertaining the idea of contracting the manufacturing. My manufacturing process is a mix between cellulose insulation and some other industries as well. We sort of combined different machines to do a very similar process, but different. Cellulose insulation companies could probably manufacture my product if we incorporated a mixing unit, a finish mixer is what I call it. And in that way, I think we can actually gear up fairly quickly to be a national product, and we can probably achieve those tonnages that we're projecting in our 3-year projections.
That's interesting. So the cellulose manufacturers would essentially just fit your product into their manufacturing?
Well, they're actually on complementary cycles. The highest point of cellulose insulation for purchases is in the fall, and the highest point for PittMoss for the consumer segment of the market is in the spring. So they're actually complementary.
I see. And one more question. How would you convince your customers to move to your product? I can sort of see that something that's made out of recycled paper and some secret additives would be a little difficult for someone to absorb if they've been using PittMoss for years.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've been following the peatland controversy for 15 years, and it's actually starting to pick up steam right now. This is the first year that the UN's meeting. They'll be meeting in Warsaw later this year, and they're actually putting peatlands as a high carbon ecosystem on the discussion docket for the first time. And what we're finding is that these products are getting more and more expensive to get to the end user, and so it's actually going to be a price-driven strategy for us. We're actually going in under sphagnum peat moss everywhere.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Alicia, you're up.
It's nice to meet you, Mont. And
Nice to meet you.
I'm very intrigued by your product.
Well, thank you.
And I wonder, does peat moss have a reusability, or is a peat moss something like a grower uses once and then they're done and they throw it out?
It's actually something that's put in the flower pots. And that's the thing that bothers me so much, is seeing all these wetlands destroyed. These are carbon-absorbing wetlands, and if we left them extant, they would continue to absorb all this carbon. But all we're doing is digging this, carbon, this peat, out of the ditches, out of the wetlands, and putting it in flower pots so people can take home, hang on their front porch, or put in their garden, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. And so this peat is sort of dispersed. It could be reused again.
It degrades in the soil, or it just gets thrown out at the end of the year when the hanging basket's done for the season or something.
Right. So your product, you've done testing against peat moss, and what sort of factors matter?
Sure.
And how have you measured up?
The 3 characteristics that are most important to a grower is soil aeration, which means that air fibers or air particles in the soil itself where the roots can grow, water retention, and nutrient retention. And we stacked up, really well against those 3 factors in the Purdue study. It was an independent study conducted by an agronomist and a horticulturist at Purdue. The only time I walked into the greenhouse, they would watch me so that I wouldn't, do anything to the sample plants. But it stacked up very well, and we're finding that in the commercial testing as well.
Mm-hmm. And these additives that you use, are they readily off-the-shelf type additives, or are these
organic,
proprietary?
all organic? And the MSDS on the material safety data sheets on all of those will prove that they're all organic. Even our colorant is derived from iron.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like your cost of goods is protected, or are you at risk for any of those ingredients?
You always have worries, don't you, about all of your sources? But I think we're pretty good. I think we are.
Right. Now you are sort of valuing your company post money at about $1.5 million. It seems. What is your revenue rate currently? You said you've been selling for a couple of weeks.
We've been selling. Well, we've actually been manufacturing for a couple of weeks. We've been selling for about 6 months. We have about 10% of our projections committed. Yeah. I have letters of commitment. It's going to probably take us 4 to 5 months to fill those orders right now.
Right.
Luckily, I don't have to take them very far because they're my landlords. I have to really just make the product.
Johnson DeFlorst. Okay,
exactly.
So right, and they own a piece of the company as well for their dollar lease?
I felt very good about giving them a partnership.
Right. Who's going to buy your company ultimately? How am I going to get my money back?
Sure.
Who are you going to exit to?
Well, there's a lot of great consumer products companies in the garden segment, and Scott's, companies like that. If you walk through a garden center show, I mean, you'll see all the big names. There's one right up the street here as well that may have some interest. But, at this point, I'm just really excited about the opportunity to build this part of the business, and we'll see where the end game is later.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. I tell you what, I've been an entrepreneur for 20 plus years, and I got to tell you, I learned stuff in this. For those of you listening in the audience, this was incredible. The questions from the judges and understanding Mont's business. So, Mont, at this point, it's back up to you. You have a minute to close.
Sure.
And this has been a great experience.
Well, thanks, Raja. I've actually been thinking about growing things since I was 12 years old. I was working at my family's ice cream stand and earning my own money. I wanted to buy a greenhouse. No one knew this. I found it in a seed catalog. I ordered it. I went down to the bank myself, got a cashier's check, bought it. It was delivered. The truck driver, I still remember my mother and the truck driver having a little battle about a 12-year-old boy's ability to contract a greenhouse. It's just something that's been in my blood, and I'm finally doing it at 49 years old, so I'm really excited about it.
Okay. Thank you, Mont. Thank you, judges, for participating. And for you listening in the audience, you get to decide who your favorite entrepreneur is. So you could go to Your American Story. Again, it's www.youramericanstory.com, and you will see a section there. Mont and PittMoss will be there listed. So if you like what you heard, go select Mont, and not only will the winner get $2,500 cash, but it's going to open a whole bunch of doors. Again, thank you for listening. This is your host, Raja. We're going to take a break right now, and I'll be right back.